A very good afternoon to all of you. Today we are going to discuss about marginal literature and marginal writings. It actually is what is carried forward from the last discussion. All of you know, those who have watched my lecture on WhatsApp, I actually uploaded my video on WhatsApp, but somehow I could not complete my lecture because of the space, the because of the size, the mobile data and the size space got exhausted, so I had to stop my video. Well, before we jump into the discussion of marginal writings, marginal literature, let us talk about what is meant by marginalization. Marginalization, actually. Marginalization is a mechanism or a process by the society to exclude a certain group or people from the mainstream society or social activity. Well, there are different definitions of marginalization. I'd like to quote particularly, not quote exactly, I'd like to refer because I am paraphrasing it in my own way. I'm not exactly quoting because I don't exactly remember the quote, but I'm paraphrasing it in my own words, own language. Peter Leonard defines marginality as a process in which a particular group or an individual is deprived of participating in social productivity. Encyclopedia of Public Health defines marginality as a process in which a particular group or a people are deprived of power by those who are at this center, who are at this center. Mark the word center because that is quite important in our discussion of marginalization and marginal literature. So, from this understanding, you can get to know, you have come to know that marginalization is actually a process of depriving a particular category of people. Now, this is almost like a vicious circle, VICIOUS, vicious circle. Now, what is a vicious circle? Let me give you an example. You are reluctant to go for morning walk because you are obese, and that because you're reluctant to go for morning walk every day, you are gaining weight. So there is a connection that between your not going for morning walk and your gaining of weight. That because you are not going, you are not able to burn your fat, and you are actually getting more and more obese day by day, right? So this is almost like a vicious circle. Similarly, here the vicious circle is like the marginalized group are deprived by the people or by the group at the center, and they are not able to contribute, and as because they are not able to contribute in the social development, they face the societal backlash, right? They face the societal backlash, and the more and more they are getting marginalized, right? So this is almost like a vicious circle that is happening at here. Literature related to marginality or marginal writings or marginal writing literature are literatures that protest against the marginalization as well as create their own voice, right? They create their own voice as well as they protest against the marginalization. For example, before that, let me add on to one more particular point that in the Indian context, marginalization can happen at the social level and at the individual level, right? For example, um, a visually handicapped man or an obese person or you know a disabled person is bullied, is attacked by his fellow friends or peers and is cornered in the class. So that is actually the marginalization occurring at the individual level. But when a Dalit, a group of Dalit people or a group of tribal people are, excluded from the society, they are actually marginalized, and that marginalization occurs at the social level. So, in the Indian context, marginalization occurs at the societal level and on the individual level. Societal level with regard to gender, class, and caste. Okay, class, caste, and gender. Now, with regard to the literature related to marginality, marginal writings, we have one best example: the tribal literature. Okay, Dalit literature. Now, tribal literature or the literature related to the tribals are not only a form of protest, but it is actually a form of resistance, as well as it is actually about creating their own voice. Okay. Now, marginal literature, the very uh, if you ask if you ask me, or if you ask yourself, then that what is the origin of marginal literature? Is there anyone who coined the term marginal literature? Oh, well, no, not exactly. Marginal literature or the literature related to marginality can, in the theoretical level, can be traced to post-colonial writings. Okay, so post-colonial writings are writings that invariably protest against the colonial marginalization, against the colonized group, by the colonized, against the colonizers, sorry, against the colonizers by the colonized people. For example, if you look at the book Empire Writes Back, the very title of the book by Bill Ashcroft, Helen Tiffin, and Garrett Griffith is very important in this context. Empire Writes Back. What is empire actually? Empire Writes Back. Probably it is actually the in the context of center other binary of power. It is the other who is actually writing against the center, right? Now, in the post colonial context, literature of the Commonwealth people. Commonwealth means, now, one thing you should know in this very context that there are writers, for example, uh, Daphne du Maurier, a very famous woman novelist, and Bernard Shaw, in his play Major Barbara, mentioned that or attacked the colonial mentality, or even E.M. Foster in A Passage to India laid bare or exposed the colonial mentality of the British. But these writings cannot come under post colonial writings. Post colonial writings belong to those writings or refer to those writers who are writing against the colonial power and those who belong to the, you know, Commonwealth countries, that is, countries which were under the colonial power, right? Now, tribal literature, I would like to particularly refer to one text, uh, two texts, one related to Dalit, another related to tribal literature. Now, in this context, I'd like to very well refer to one beautiful essay, which I read long back. I find it quite interesting, and such a brilliant essay. That particular essay is, uh, the writer of the essay is S. Anandi et al. I mean, there are three or four writers who contributed to the article. S. Anandi was one of them. Um, the title of the essay is Masculinity, Notes from a Tamil Village. Notes from a Tamil Village. Okay? Uh, Work, Caste, and Competing Masculinity. Mark the title. You can find it from EPW, Economic and Political Weekly W. From that, you can find it. Work, caste, and competing masculinity, colon, notes from a Tamil village. Now, in that essay, Anandi et al. Have pointed out that in that village, which is near Chennai, okay, uh, there is a village, and the villagers of that particular village, all of them are Dalit, most of them Dalit, only very few of them are Brahmins. Now, the Brahmin women, before the independence, mostly before the independence, they actually, you know, uh, used the Dalit men of their village, uh, who were well built, well structured, and those Brahmin women, Brahmin housewives, actually used those, Dalit men for sexual gratification. In order to satiate their sexual lust, they used those Tamil Dalit men. And this is an example of subordinate masculinity, because the Dalit men, they found that their masculinity were controlled and dominated by the femininity of those Brahmin women. Now, what happened after the independence, mostly during the 80s or 90s, the table got turned, and most of the Brahmin family, they moved to the nearby posh area, that is Chennai, and the remaining Brahmin families, the Brahmin girls and women, they were, you know teased, booed by the Dalit men. So, before independence, it was a kind of dominating masculinity for the Dalit men, and after the independence, it is a kind of superior masculinity. Okay, first, I got confused. I'm sorry, please pardon me. Before, I think it was, subordinate masculinity. Before the independence, it was subordinate masculinity for the Dalit men, and after the independence, it was actually dominating masculinity for the Dalit men. So here, as you can find from this very essay, that it is actually an act of resistance. It is an act of protest, if we can find it, by a marginalized group. So this is one feature of marginal writings. Okay, that it is not only marginal writings, not only is a form of resistance, is a form of protest, but it is also, theoretically speaking, creating a discourse to come to the forefront, to speak their own voice, the voice of the tribal people, the voice of the Dalit people. Now, one example, one literature I'd like to refer to. There are two literature. There are so many Dalit texts which I have read. For example, Bama's Sangati, Karuku. Then there are Bengali Dalit writers. For Manohar Mauli Biswas, I have read. I have read Baby Kambale, The Prison We Broke. So most of the Dalit text, they are actually a kind of protest. For example, in Bama's Garaku, Bama is narrating. It is but Dalit writings are mostly autobiographies, and they are also called the life writings. There are so many terms related to Dalit autobiography. I'm introducing you to many, many terms. Life writings, autobiography. Now, each and every term has a kind of significance. When I call it life writing and autobiography, it has some kind of significance. It is more related to the personal, experience of the writer. Now, in Karuku, Bama talks about, how the Dalit women are triply marginalized in terms of gender, class, and economy, right? Yeah, class, gender, also, I'm sorry, gender, class, and caste. Sorry, triple marginalization, gender, caste, and class. Now, one interesting fact is that these Dalit uh, women are marginalized in terms of the other community people, though those who are non-Dalit, but they are marginalized even within their own community. That is because of their gender. Within their own community, they are marginalized. Now, here also, there. Let me talk to you. Discuss about another important term, subaltern. Okay. Now, I'd like to particularly refer to one very important text by Mahasweta Devi, Breast Giver, Stonnodini, Breast Giver. Now, that is also a very important text. Now, in Breast Giver, Mahasweta Devi actually introduces one character, Jashoda, who actually acts as a milk giver or acts as a foster mother to a family, the Sarkar, who are actually sorry, not Sarkar, who a nun who are actually non-Brahmin. Okay, so Jashoda acts as a foster mother for the family who are actually non-Brahmin, and Jashoda is a Brahmin character. So now look at the thing. Even being a Brahmin, you are actually marginalized, and that marginalization is happening not only because of your gender but also because of your class, because here money is superior to your caste. Okay, economy is superior to your caste. Now, regarding all these things, there are so many books are there. For example, you can refer to Ranajit Guha's article, or you can refer to Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's subaltern historiography. I'm not going back to all those things there, this because this is a very small lecture. Now, regarding this, but this Josoda, the title has been quite interestingly used by the writer. Josoda, the Josoda is actually in Hindu mythology is the foster mother of Krishna. Okay, so she is very revered and respected in Hindu culture. But here, in this particular story, Josoda ultimately dies of cancer, breast cancer, and her milk is purchased by a family who are actually non-Brahmins. So, the character Jashoda, who is a Brahmin, is relegated to insignificance. Relegated, R-E-L-E-G-A-T-E-D, relegated to insignificance. That is one of the very important thing of that you have to know. So the first one I have given an example of caste. Second one I have given an example of class. And now coming back to the example of tribal literature. Tribal literature, I'd like to refer to that one important thing that tribals are somewhat, you know, different in terms of their marginalization. Why? Because the Dalits are actually, in according to Hindu Varna system, we have the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. Dalits are the untouchables or the Sudras. That is the lowest category of the Hindu mythology. Sorry, Hindu religion, Hindu caste system. But the tribals, they initially had their own kind of, religion. They lived in the jungles, and they actually they believed in a different religion called animism, animism. Animism, that is in the spirit of nature, spirit of God, and all that. So they believed in that philosophy. Although later the lot of transformation happened with regard to the tribal culture, tribal religion. Some of them embraced Hinduism, some of them embraced Christianity. That is a different thing. But initially, they were quite different from the mainstream society, and they had their own kind of culture. But because they were living far away, the government did not pay attention to them. Rather, they wanted to encroach upon their own property. They encroach upon, and deforestation, grabbing of the land and grabbing of their property and encroachment, infuriated the tribals, and they declared, or they waged war against uh, the British first, and the Jamindars, and then later they against the current government. As all of you know, you have most of you have watched the movie RRR. In RRR, the character Bhima. Okay, the Bhima is actually belonging to the tribal community. Okay, tribal family, and Jal Jungle Jamin. He's actually living in the forest. So Jal Jungle Jamin. That was actually the slogan. Actually, or that was the motto which of the tribal people. Anyway, coming back to the tribal literature, one particular work I would like to refer to is, um, the Adivasi will not dance. Now, the Adivasi will not dance is actually by Hasda Sauvendra Sekhar. It is a kind of the book has been banned, but for the sake of, because the book has been banned because of this too much realistic presentation of the tribal community. Now, there are representation of how the tribal community, we are actually we see the tribal people only as a kind of meant for performing dance. As you know, when you go to Kwai Hat in Santiniketan, most of us go to Kwai and watch the Sautali people performing live dance. And we just pay some money and we come back without having any genuine feeling for the most of us. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't have, but most of us, we just go there for entertainment, without having any genuine feeling for their tribal culture and tribal community. Now, this is why in one of the stories, actually the book, the Adivasi Will Not Dance, is a collection of 10 stories. In one of the stories, the character protest that no, we will not dance. So Adivasi will not dance. That is, the Adivasi will not entertain the people anymore. Don't see us merely as a kind of entertainment. So do not judge the tribal people only by the entertainmental value. We also have our own culture. Try to respect us, respect our culture. That is what the tribal people, the one of the one of the stories the character is saying. In another story, the writer had described that one tribal girl, you know, is actually selling her own body for just a piece of bread, for a piece of crumb of bread. One tribal girl is sleeping with one RPF Jawan. So that's actually a kind of I mean, the writer had described the sex act between the RPF Jawan and the tribal girl in a very in a very you know explicitly without having any sort implicit. Now, that's probably because the writer wants to jerk the conscience of the common people that see this is actually what is happening with the tribal people. You are only always looking at us only for the entertainment, but see, this is actually our plight. We are suffering, and we don't have money, and even for just a crumb of bread, we are ready to sleep with anyone we like, no matter whether we, contract any disease or anything. We can sleep with anyone because hunger is so. I mean, so much there among the tribal people. So that's all. So that's all about my lecture. So from my lecture, you can come to know that tribal literature is not only a form of protest, it is a form of resistance, as well as tribal literature is actually a kind of is a way to create a discourse to get acceptance and recognition in the mainstream culture, mainstream literature. So that's all about it. Thank you so much. God bless.